Hello. Many of you may have seen this today. Starbucks announced that it will be covering the costs of travel for its employees who want to kill their children through abortion if those employees live in a state that outlawed or restricted such practices. Starbucks is far from the only company to have done this in recent weeks. This goes on to detail the Starbucks' announcement. They are also paying for travel for their transsexual employees that want to have surgeries. Forbes ran an article last week about listing a number of companies who have made similar promises to their employees. Amazon, no surprise. Other companies that no one's heard of that might just be looking for publicity for a certain segment of the population. Apple, of course. Citigroup, Kobani Yogurt, DoorDash, Levi, of course. They're in the Bay Area, though. They've been going down this anti-family, anti-traditional values, Christian values for some time. Lyft, Microsoft, Salesforce, who also owns Slack, Starbucks, there they are, Tesla, everybody's favorite car company billionaire, Yelp, all sorts of these companies. And so why did they do this? People often ask, well, why do they want to alienate half of their customer base or some large percentage of their customer base? And the fact is they're not alienating them, because the people that say that they're against abortion or against transvestism still give these companies their money, the money that God has given them to steward. Why? Because people like their products, or people like the convenience. Some people like their lattes every morning. Other people like the convenience of 2-day free shipping. And they are willing to sacrifice the principles they espouse, and more importantly for Christians, the principles, values, commands of God, so that they can have the products they want and the conveniences that they want. And how did we get to this point where this is blatant? This isn't like Amazon or Starbucks giving money to Planned Parenthood or some third-party group. These companies are directly paying for their employees to go somewhere and kill their children. They're directly funding this. So it's like, supporting someone who drives people to an abortion clinic. We actually had this in a city in which I lived. The local high school, it turned out they were driving teenage girls to abortion clinics to get an abortion so their parents wouldn't know. Well, this same thing's going on here. So when you spend your money at Amazon or Starbucks or Tesla or Levi, understand that the money that you are giving them is directly going to pay for this. Amazon's giving up to $4,000. $4,000. An abortion procedure costs around $600. It's cheap to kill your kids in America. But they're spending up to $4,000. Now, if they didn't have all this money, do you think they'd be able to afford to do that? Of course not. But they know they can appease the activist industry, and the people like Christians who say they're against this will still give them money. They pay no price for this. So why wouldn't they do it? They can win both ways. And this is as blatant and upfront as anything we've seen. Short of them inviting Planned Parenthood into their offices to perform abortions on site, this is as direct as you get. And so it's time to look for alternatives, because we are funding this as Christians. And we can't say that these issues are really important to us and complain about atheists or leftists or Democrats or anybody else when we are the ones supplying money to the companies who are doing this. We are paying to transport these women and their children to an abortion clinic to be killed. That's what we are, as Christians, are paying for if we're giving these companies money. There's a great website called Second Vote, and they list different companies and they score them based on things like abortion, church rights, gun rights, environment, education, American traditional values. They rate them. And many companies choose to be neutral. And that's fine, because they're supposed to be selling products and services. They're not supposed to be activist organizations. But as we've seen, and as I said, as long as companies think they can get by with it and appease a minute percentage of the population and not have to pay a price from everybody else, then they're going to keep doing it. And some of them actually ideologically support this. Some are just virtue signaling and trying to get money. But again, it costs them nothing. So we have an opportunity to take the money that God gives us and steward it in a way that honors Him. Now, are those companies plentiful right now? No, they're not, and they won't be if people don't start supporting them with their money. These companies, there's more and more springing up all the time. The parallel economy, if you listen to Andrew Torba from Gab, these companies are there to provide options, but especially if we as Christians choose to give our money to demonic companies, then the options that we potentially have that are not doing the devil's work, those companies are going to go away, and we're not going to have options. And we have to be able to inconvenience ourselves in order to obey God. Jesus talked about this. He was talking about his own suffering, and then he said, "If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me." So if we can't deny ourselves a cup of coffee or a pair of blue jeans from a specific company, how are we going to put up with the persecution that Christians in other countries, Christians who are arrested, tortured, and killed for their faith, they are suffering much more inconvenience. They're not just missing out on a cup of coffee or 2-day free shipping. They're missing out on a whole lot more. If we're not willing to sacrifice, how are we going to be strong? How are we going to learn to rely on God as these things get worse and worse? Look at what's happened over the last several years, the last couple of decades, and now it's gotten to the point where companies are bragging. They're boasting about financing the murder of their employees' children. And we look around and go, how did we get this way? How did this country get this way? It's because people who had a choice chose to side with these demonic companies. They weren't willing to put up with the hardship. They weren't willing to take up their cross daily. Brew your own coffee. Go somewhere else. Buy different jeans. Go to a different e-commerce site. There's thousands of them. You might have to work a little harder. You might have to search a little harder. You might have to wait a little longer. No instant gratification. That's okay. God strengthens us. But if we can't trust Him to strengthen us on these little things, how are we going to be able to trust Him when even bigger things come? And they are obviously coming very quickly and very, very soon. Good night. God bless.